Hello, and welcome to Political Forum for Wednesday, November 5th, 2014. We welcome tonight as our special guest, Alderman Natashia Holmes from Chicago's 7th Ward. Welcome back to Political Forum.
Thanks for the invite.
I'm Rod Joy, a board member here at CAN TV. Political Forum is a live, interactive call-in program that's designed to connect you directly with your elected officials. Over the next 25 minutes or so, we hope you'll have an opportunity to learn more about Alderman Holmes, her views on some of the most pressing challenges and opportunities facing the city of Chicago. Above all, this program is about fostering a strong sense of civic engagement in the city. Your views, your voice are a big component of the program. We invite you to join the discussion by calling us now at 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060, and we'll try to get to as many questions and comments as you have for the Alderman. Alderman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you again.
So for folks who may be meeting you for the first time tonight, tell us a little bit about the 7th Ward.
Okay, well, I am Alderman Natashia Holmes from the magnificent 7th Ward. The 7th Ward is actually home to 4 different neighborhoods. We have South Shore, South Chicago, Calumet Heights, and Jeffrey Manor. We also are one of the only places in the city where we have a neighborhood where houses actually sit on private beach. Furthermore, we are the gateway to the Lakeside development, which is 600 acres of undeveloped property along Lake Michigan. And we are also home to the second largest conventional water treatment plant in the world.
Well, we're coming off of the heels of a major historic election last night. You care to share any of your observations about the aftermath of the midterm elections?
Well, I think a couple things. I think, for one, I just want to give, just a lot of props to the residents of the 7th Ward. We had over 46% voter turnout. That's totally awesome. I'm the ward committeeman, the Democratic committeeman. I am, chairperson of the 7th Ward Regular Democratic Organization. We stomped for the Democrats last night and, over the course of the election period. And it's great to see that turnout. While we're disappointed at some of the results, I think what it shows is that, we're showing people that we care and that we want to make sure that we get services when we ask for them from our elected officials that we've been supporting.
Great. And you mentioned a strong turnout in the ward. I think turnout for the city was about 36% yesterday.
Yeah, so
how did
for us.
Early voting and same-day registration, how did some of these new measures impact your residents?
Well, I don't know all the details exactly. I know that for early voting, we had great turnout at our site in the ward, but also at other sites throughout the city that were convenient for people to vote. We also had one polling place where you could pull provisional ballots. And so I don't know what the, makeup is, but 46% of, all registered voters in the 7th Ward turning out, and that's 10% greater than the city. That's saying something.
This is Political Forum, a live interactive call-in program. We have as our special guest tonight, Alderman Natashia Holmes from Chicago's 7th Ward. I believe we have a caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yeah, I have 2 questions if I'm allowed to ask.
Let's do it.
My first question is, should it be a gambling casino in Chicago because they are in the suburbs and other local counties? And the second thing is about the red light cameras, like on 79th Street, Stony Island. Should there be a referendum to abolish the red light cameras, or is it okay just the way it is?
Thank you, caller.
Okay, so the first question was with regard to a casino in Chicago. I think that's an issue that's been really debated. It hasn't been something that has really come down to the municipal level in such a way. I think those are decisions that are made at the state level, and then they kind of grant a license to a municipality. So, when it gets to the point where we can talk about that, obviously casino revenue would be another way for the city to get money in their coffers. So I wouldn't say that, either way, I think I want to be in a position to actually debate the good, the bad, and the ugly of what a casino would mean. With regard to red light cameras, I mean, I'm like everyone else. I've been caught by the red light cameras. I hate the one at Stony Island and 79th Street. I don't know what route is going to be taken. I know that there are, issues that are before the law department right now and before the Department of Transportation with regard to the red light camera issues and, the prior company and a lot of the problems that were had with that prior company. But at this point in time, I think that those discussions are underway. And so I agree. I think, even addressing the issue of the yellow light being not the actual 3 seconds, because, every second counts when you're in the middle of an intersection. And I know that the other thing I will say is that I have had conversations with CDOT about that intersection in and of itself. As many of you know, 79th Street, where South Chicago and Stony Island intersect, there's not even a turn signal if you're going east or west. And that really halts traffic in a really bad way. And I have been caught by that red light camera. So I do understand your issue and concern.
Thanks for getting us off to a good start, caller. And I think some people would argue that Chicago does have a casino and it just so happens to be in Hammond, Indiana.
Well, that's close to the 7th Ward, actually.
I think we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Hi, you mentioned the Lakeside development in your ward. Is that former steel site? And if so, are there any plans for developing it or in the near future? What's the latest on that?
Thank you, caller.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Lakeside development, so like I mentioned, it is the site of the former U.S. Steel. It's 600 acres of undeveloped property along Lake Michigan. Many of you might know that last year in October, we opened South Lakeshore Drive, which is basically a rerouted 41, which if most of you know that live on that side of town, you take 41 and you'd have to cut through the neighborhood. Now we have this 4-lane, nice, great roadway. And, me in my transportation world, new roadways don't get built in urban areas. So I was very excited that was a part of something that was happening on the southeast side. As far as Lakeside is concerned, so Lakeside is, Lakeside is in and of itself like its own entity, a LLC, I believe. And, the only tenant that has really said that they were going to move there is Mariano's. And actually that would be in the 10th Ward. But hey, nobody cares about lawns except Alderman. So that's the only tenant that's come. There are a lot of things that are going to have to happen before, any development comes there. Obviously, it was a steel mill site. There's a lot of slag still there. They're doing a lot of cleanup with the Mud from Parks program, which is like a state program, actually. They've gotten a lot of grants to do some cleanup. I think most of us who live over in that area know that at one point, many, many years ago, Solo Cup was interested in doing some sort of light industrial development there. That didn't pull through. And speaking of Lakeside in and of itself, I think one of the beginning things that's going to have to happen is really working with the community, working with the developer, working with the stakeholders, the elected officials, and all involved to really make sure that what we're doing there is really going to be something that the community can appreciate. If you don't mind, I'd like to just talk about what I envision for Lakeside in terms of what it means now. So right now, as I mentioned, 79th Street is really the gateway into Lakeside. But 79th Street, as it stands today, we've lost a lot of retail. We've lost a lot of, investment in what goes on in a traditional neighborhood retail corridor. So I'd really like to see that corridor be developed, because once that happens, then Lakeside can be successful. And that's the beginning of Lakeside. We still have 83rd Street, 85th, 87th, 95th. All these traditional neighborhood, besides 95th, of course, traditional neighborhood retail corridors really are going to have to be successful if we want Lakeside to be successful. And so I'm really working with Alderman Pope and Alderman Harris on looking at ways that we can get people engaged and to want to come and invest in our neighborhoods. If you look at where Lakeside is and where the majority of the 7th Ward is, it's located in an area of the city that is described as the Stony Island sub-retail market. And if you look at the analysis that's been done on that retail market, it shows that there's a $400 million gap in that retail market. That means that annually, $400 million leaves our community and goes to other neighborhoods or the suburbs, and increases their wealth and their spending power, and, increases their opportunity to really get investment. And I think that what we struggle with on a corridor like 79th or 83rd or 87, what we struggle with is that there are retail options there, but they're not retail options that the majority of community really want to support. We want to have stores that we want to support, not just someone who came, they found some space and they open up, some small store that, they end up not being good corporate citizens. And, we want our neighborhood to be strong, but we're going to have retail that we can support.
Great. So we've had questions so far on gaming, red light cameras, and the Lakeside development. We'd like to invite your other questions and comments for Alderman Holmes. Please join the discussion at 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060. And I believe we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, and I had a question to the Alderman. I was inquiring about then area going to be any affordable housing over in that area. What I mean by that is the property not...
Did we lose you? Seems to be a question about affordable housing in the ward.
I would say that there's quite a bit of affordable housing in the 7th Ward in its entirety. One of the things that we struggle with throughout the city, I would say, is that there's not really a lot of parity when it comes to affordable housing. As if you look at a map of the city and you look at where housing options are, there are a lot of housing options on the south and southeast sides. However, where are the jobs on the south and the southeast sides? So while I can live, maybe in the 7th Ward in an apartment that would fit my family, I would have to travel to get to my job. And I think the parity has to come where we have to start seeing more affordable options in other parts of the city where you can live near work. Because what that equates to is that your transportation costs are decreased. Maybe your, other types of commuting costs are decreased. Maybe, your child care expenses are decreased. So there are a lot of things that go along with that. So I think as a whole, the city needs to be addressing that issue.
This is Political Forum, a live interactive call-in program. We invite you to flex your activism muscles by joining us at 312-738-1060. I believe we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for taking my phone call. Alderman, I just have a question for you. It seems that the voter turnout was kind of low, and on Facebook I noticed a lot of people seemed disenchanted and indifferent as to whether they should go and vote. What are some things that you think can help people go out and vote for the aldermanic elections?
I was saying this earlier, and I always start my committeeman meetings with this same statement, which is, I always vote. And the reason why is because I recognize the sacrifices that were made for me to have this opportunity. I also have parents who went to segregated high schools and uncles and aunts who were, involved in protests and things of that nature. So I look at voting as something very serious, and I try to stress that. I think that a lot of this newer generation seems a little bit removed from that. And I always tell, folks younger than me, hey, look, we've come far, but we haven't come that far. And there's still a lot of headway to be made. But if it's not reinforced throughout every kind of component of your life, you can't complain about anything at all if you don't vote. There's nothing else I can really say about that. So I think it's making, I'm actually very proud of the voter turnout that happened in the 7th Ward, 46%. That's really high compared to, the city at large. And I think that, I think it's been a lot of my effort over the course of the last year and a half of really pushing that message that when you vote, and elected officials recognize that you're coming out to the polls, they're going to pay attention because they're going to realize that you're the reason why they are in office. And it's almost a selfish way of looking at it if an elected official is looking at it that way. But that's really what it comes down to, because they know that they rely on you for that vote. And so stressing the importance of voting, I can't do it enough. And, I always tell people, sometimes I have to give sermons where I have people saying, I'm going to register to vote. I think over the course of a year and a half, we've probably on average registered 3 to 5 people out of my office. And I even put a stamp on it for them. All you have to do is fill out the form. So I just think that, it becomes a message that the community has to continue to spread. You have to tell your neighbor. You have to tell your neighbor's kids. They have to talk about it. You have to get these kids engaged and involved at an early age. When there are forums downtown, you need to be bringing your kids with you so that they see that you're engaged and involved. So as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about voting and what it means for us. Because like I said, if you're going to complain about something, you need to vote.
So we need to do all that we can to push back against civic disengagement and
Right.
fight civic illiteracy. And those of us in Chicago, we have 110 days until we get to do this again on February 24th for our local municipal elections. But to just piggyback on the caller's question, there were some shenanigans yesterday and some robocalls to election judges that created some confusion and caused a lot of problems. And I think this is an issue that the city council is exploring, and maybe you could say a few words about that.
Right. So there's a resolution put forward today for the chairman of the Rules Committee, who is Alderman Michelle Harris in the 8th Ward, to hold a hearing with the Chicago Board of Elections about what happened yesterday. So, and just as a little bit of context, I guess a few days before the election, some election judges received a robocall that said that they had to take an additional training as well as they had to basically vote a certain way. And I don't quote me because that's just what I've been reading in the newspaper and what we've kind of heard. And so that really discouraged a lot of people who were going to be election judges. And so you had some polling places where you didn't have election judges show up. You had some places where, they were so understaffed that it was very hard. People waited in line for, a long time to vote. And so, it really disrupted the process. And, as I went around to different precincts on yesterday, my biggest concern was making sure that, people do not get disenfranchised in this process. This election was too important for, all of our communities, for our state, for our nation. And so I didn't want to see people being disenfranchised. But, for me to go in a polling place and for judges telling me, like, we really need help. I can't even go to the bathroom. That's discouraging. I mean, thank God that we had people who were willing to work the hard shifts and do what was necessary and take that sacrifice. But, again, I always tell people voting is a fundamental right, which means that at the highest level, it's going to be scrutinized by any legal challenge. Education is not even a fundamental right in this country. So we shouldn't take voting any less lightly than we do education.
Amen. I think we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Did you have a question for the alderman?
I feel so sorry that the Republicans are getting into the door. Only thing I would like to say, I would like to ask you this question. I was a judge during an election, and there wasn't a lot of black African Americans out there voting. Why is that?
That's an interesting question. I think it's a very good question. I can't speak for those who didn't vote. I would just say that, in the 7th Ward, we had really high turnout. We are a mixed ward. We're majority black, but we do have white and Hispanics and Polish people who live and folks of Asian descent who live in the 7th Ward and who vote there as well. So the majority of people who are voting in the precincts that I oversee were black, and maybe just across the state and across the city we didn't see that. And again, it's us encouraging each other. It really comes down to that. It's us encouraging each other and making sure that we're getting out, we're spreading the message, and we're making sure that, our voice is being heard. And the way that your voice is heard is through your vote.
I think we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Hi, Alderman.
Hi.
Hi, I'm curious to find out your opinion, considering that we will have a new governor next year. What do you hope the General Assembly will pass during the veto session?
Well, I think the biggest thing I would like to see the General Assembly pass is increase in the minimum wage. Obviously, it was on the ballot, but it wasn't like a constitutional amendment. It was really just
An advisory measure.
An advisory measure. But because it was voted on overwhelmingly across the state, I believe it was over 60% of the vote said that people really wanted to see it increase. I think like that would be the biggest thing that could happen in veto session, and the biggest thing I'd like to see happen at this point. And I a part of that reason is because it's not like 20 years ago when you worked at McDonald's and you were 16 and that was just your job. We now have people who are trying to feed their families off of jobs like these. And, I understand the business perspective, small business perspective, I should say. But at the end of the day, when you start increasing, the value of people and the value that they have, then your value as a business person, as a community, as an organization starts to increase as well. So I think that would be the biggest thing I like to see.
And you have a deep policy background, and you've been an advocate for public safety. And I think one of the measures you introduced called for the creation of a national gun registry. And maybe you could say a few words about that initiative.
Right. So, obviously, the National Gun Registry would be something that would have to be done at the federal level. But the reason why I introduced the resolution in City Council was because, if we can make all the laws we want in Chicago and in the state of Illinois, but if in Indiana I can buy 35 guns and come back and sell them on the streets, it doesn't matter. So I really put this resolution forward asking the congressional delegation in Illinois and the entire Congress to put together a national gun registry. I understand some of the fears that people have about, wanting to know what type of guns you have and things like that. I think this is more of a protective measure because then we know where these guns are going. At the end of the day, guns are instrumentalities that move through interstate commerce. Congress governs instrumentalities that move through interstate commerce. If we really want to see things changes happen with regard to guns in our communities, Congress has to take a stand.
I think we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you with us?
Hello. I just want to comment. It's a two-part question. How they click on it. You just mentioned something about guns and stuff. Why don't you put the National Guard around the area? Because, if people get control of the guns, even if they're all registered, people will lose more control of this. This will be another Iraq. And I disagree with the previous caller. Said they were wrong about having a Republican in office. We do need a Republican in office from time to time to keep us in order. Because if we have a Democrat every time, we'll get more laid back. So, and sometimes our votes do not count sometimes. So,
thank you, caller. So I think there were two pieces.
Yeah, so the National Guard, and I'll be honest, I really don't know what goes into actually calling in the National Guard into a community. I'm not really sure if it probably have to be at the mayoral level for something like that to happen. I think it's interesting. I think that what you'll find, especially in the 7th Ward, and as you know, I've been talking to residents, especially over the summer, especially now, we've seen an increased police presence. I actually have an office on 75th Street and on 79th Street, and I see officers walking the beat. So I think things are changing. I think things aren't as bad as they actually seem. The news tends to sensationalize, violence and drama about, something that happens in a violent way. Well, as I've told people all the time, if my neighborhood was so bad, you wouldn't see people riding their bikes every day or walking the streets with their kids or carrying groceries to and from their house or getting off the bus. So it's not as bad as the media makes it seem. I don't know what to say about the Republican in office. I think that whoever is in office, we have to work with. Republican or Democrat, we have to work with to make sure that we are getting the needs met that are of major concern in our community. And for me, as the Democratic committeeman, I've said this since I've become committeeman. Democratic values are important in urban America, and we have to recognize that. And there are a lot with social values with regard to, medical needs, social service needs, education. But at the end of the day, we have to work with whoever is in office to make sure that these things are being addressed in our communities.
All right, we're about out of time. Great questions tonight. But I understand in your spare time tomorrow, you're going to be sworn in for the bar exam.
Yes, I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Do your constituents know about that?
They know now.
They know now.
Some of them know, but yeah, they know now. Yeah.
Right. We'd like to thank Alderman Natashia Holmes for joining us tonight. In order for our democracy to thrive, we need an informed and engaged citizenry. So I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. I'd like to thank you for calling in, and we'd like to invite you to join us next week on Wednesday at 7 p.m. for the next edition of Political Forum. Alderman, thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.